Welcome to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, a licensed psychologist and grief specialist, here to help change the conversation about grief and build community and connection while we all adjust to this new normal we are living in. This podcast is for you if you are grieving or if you are supporting someone in a season of grief. I'm glad you're here. Hey friends, welcome back to Grief is the New Normal. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, grief psychologist, and today we're talking about something that I know a lot of you have felt and maybe haven't had the words for: grief and burnout. Because let's be honest, grief is already exhausting. We talked about this a few episodes ago. And when you're also the one taking care of everyone else, holding it together for your family, showing up for clients, your coworkers, your community, it doesn't just drain you, it depletes you. And that's what we're getting into today: how grief and burnout intersect, why compassion fatigue is real, especially if you're in a helping role, and how to start protecting your own energy before you hit full-on emotional exhaustion. So if you've ever felt like you're running on fumes, like you're constantly showing up for everyone except yourself, or like you've lost your ability to care because you're just that overwhelmed, this one is for you. Let's get into it. Okay. First things first, grief is already a full-time job. Even when you're not actively thinking about your loss, your brain is processing, your body is holding it, your emotions are working overtime. It's exhausting. And when you add in the weight of caregiving, supporting others, or even just trying to function in a world that doesn't pause for grief, that's where burnout and compassion fatigue can start creeping in. What does that look like? You feel like you have nothing left to give. Even basic tasks feel overwhelming. Answering a text feels like a chore. Making a decision, it even feels like too much. You have nothing left. You're running on fumes. You're running on E. You're maybe running on autopilot. You're going through the motions, doing what you quote unquote need to do, but you don't feel connected to any of it. Almost like you're watching yourself in a movie, but you're not connected to yourself, even though you're the main character. Feeling like you're emotionally numb, or maybe the other end where everything just feels too big. So one minute you're completely shutting down, and the next you're crying in your car over nothing. And it's riding that spectrum of emotions from one end to the other. It's a lot. It's everything or nothing. The faucet is on or it's off. It's a drought. It's intense. Maybe you're feeling resentful. Maybe you feel like you're the one always holding things together, and you feel like people keep taking from you and no one's pouring back in. So you're the giver and there's just a lot of take, and it's almost because that's what you've always done. They don't know how to do any different, and you're struggling to figure out how to do different. And when you're grieving, it's this extra layer that you're trying to move through, and it's or filter through. And yeah, it's every task is walking through molasses and just dragging you. It's a lot. And your body is screaming at you: headaches, stomach issues, chronic fatigue, muscle aches. Your nervous system is fried when we're in that burnout space. So I don't know if any of these concepts resonated with you. If they do, if it sounds a little familiar, that's burnout. That's compassion fatigue, and it's very real. Okay, story time with Heather. I have experienced burnout off and on many times in the past 15 years since Garrett died. And I guess the memory that most comes to mind that showed me it in the biggest way was, I still remember the month. I remember the day, like January 2013. I was at my first practicum. I was finally doing grief work. I had signed up to work with Providence Hospice in the bereavement department, doing bereavement therapy, third year of your grad program. So they're really pushing you to get your dissertation proposal in. So I'm trying to work on that. We had our clinical qualifying exams, so I'm trying to study for those. and I'm seeing clients for the first time. So I'm learning what it means to hold space and have capacity for clinical work. There was a lot going on, and the relationship I'd been at the time had ended, and it was very devastating. It did not end well. And I remember driving to class because my practicum was 20 hours a week, and then I still had full-time class load. So I would go to class from 6 to 10 at night, and then sometimes we'd have weekend classes, and I'm leaving my practicum after a full client load that day, and I'm driving to class, and I have my first visual aura migraine. I'm driving. I thought I was going blind. When I was leaving practicum, I was like, oh, my computer looks funny. I'm having a hard time focusing. And then I'm driving, and I thought I was going blind. I'd never had a migraine before. And suddenly I had the aura, and then I had the most excruciating headache of my life. I was not okay. I was already pretty emotionally wrecked just from all I was trying to do and produce and hold. And then my body started crapping out on me. And that was the beginning of a number of different health complications, because grad school, definitely not for the faint of heart. And it really took a toll on me because I was still trying to do all of these things. I was volunteering with hospice. I was volunteering with a camp. I was trying to maintain friendships. I was trying to recover from this breakup and still be a support for my family and my parents and do grad school. Like there was too much on my plate. I was breaking. And I share that story because there is a point where you are doing too much. And sometimes it feels like we don't have a choice in how much we're doing. And I get that. And it was like, that was the first eye-opening time for me where it was like, oh, I need to figure out how to say no to more things, because if I want to survive this grad process to be a therapist at the end, like I have to do something different. And I still get migraines to this day. That was my very first one. And I still get them when I'm in seasons of higher stress or I'm doing too much. And that's something I've had to work with now, because it's like my body was speaking to me. So I want to take a second to call it something specific here. This kind of burnout that I was describing earlier is especially brutal for helpers, caregivers, and anyone in holding space for others' roles. Because when you're used to being the one people turn to, when your job, your role, your identity has been about helping, supporting, and taking care of others, you start to feel like you can't put it down. Like you can't put that role down. And listen, I get it. You just heard my story. When you're in that role, it's really so hard to step back. You might feel guilty. You might worry you're letting people down. You might think, if I don't do it, who will? And here's the truth. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup. And some people might get upset. Some people might not understand why you're changing the role that you've always been. And in family systems, sometimes we have these unwritten rules and the different roles that we follow within family systems. And it can be hard to break out of that. It's complicated. It's not easy. It takes a lot of intentional work and support to do it. And we can only handle so much. So if you've been feeling like you, quote unquote, should be handling this grief better, or like you, quote unquote, should be able to keep going, I want to say this loud and clear. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to put it down. It is okay to say no. It is okay for people to have feelings about you saying no. It is not your job to rescue them from the feelings that they are having because you said no, because you're putting up different boundaries, because you're committing in different ways. So, great. Now, what do we do about this? Because I know some of you are listening and thinking, okay, great, but I can't just disappear from my responsibilities. I hear you. I really do. So let's talk about real, tangible ways to recover from burnout and start protecting your energy, even when stepping away completely isn't an option. Like, we are not in the cut out, cut off decision-making space. Like, we're just trying to figure out how can we pivot or do things differently to reduce the burnout, to protect some of your spoons, right? We've talked about the spoon metaphor before. So number one, stop expecting yourself to function at 120%. Your brain is in survival mode. Please lower the damn bar. Asking yourself, what is the bare minimum I need to do today? Let's do that and let the rest go. My fabulous business coach, Caroline, she turned me on to this productivity planner. And I realize that this is going to sound like such an oxymoron because I'm saying productivity planner in efforts to be productive when really it's not. Sometimes there's so much to do. Your to-do list is ever growing. And okay, I slip into that shame spiral if I don't do everything on my to-do list. And yet it's not realistic to do everything on your to-do list. So what I like about this is it breaks it down into like your 3 most important tasks. And I do this with clients too. So if you are watching on YouTube or on video clips, this is an example of the page. And it talks about what's your most important task and it stars that one. So it's trying to give you permission to set one thing for the day. Okay, today I need to organize my papers for taxes and get them to the CPA. Okay, that's the most important thing. And if I get nothing else done, if I respond to no text messages or emails or phone calls, if I at least get that done, then I got the thing done that I needed to get for the day. And that was enough, right? Thinking through, how do I structure my day to get the bare minimum done or the most important thing done, I think is so important. And I talk about this with clients. I call it ABC prioritizations. For the morning, you sit down and you write down what's the one thing that like must get done no matter what. And for sake of continuity, the example I used was getting all of my tax documents together for the CPA. It's stressing me out. It's going to reduce my mental load if I get that off. And that has been on my to-do list for 3 weeks because what do? We avoid the harder things on our to-do list and it feels good to check the boxes. So we try to do the easier things, but then that means we're avoiding the hard things and it just doesn't get done. So I'm going to just do that. That's my number 1 goal for the day. And then I'm going to set my B tasks. And that's 1 or 2 things that I need to get done today. So those can be of equal importance. Like I need to mail my care package to my little buddy who's at college, and I need to call insurance back to make sure we've got a pre-auth for my kid's doctor's appointment. Okay, so those are the 2 things that are my B priorities. But I can't touch those things until I have done my A task first. And then you have some C tasks. This can be 3 to 5 things that you'd like to get done that day. That might be laundry or baking some bread for the week or whatever your day-to-day tasks are that like you would like to get done, but they are not as important as your A and B priorities. And you can't touch the easy box tasks, those C-level tasks, until you have done A and B items. And you can just carry them to the next day. So you're not losing track of the tasks, because that can be a challenge too, is that we're worried we're going to forget the things. So we just keep cycling through them in our heads over and over again. And that costs spoons, that costs energy too. Putting them onto the paper. I love a paper option. I know not everybody does. I'm a little old school. I'm an elder millennial here. If you want to use your phone, that's fine too, but I find it therapeutic to have the physical check and to handwriting it out. It just helps see it for me on paper. So anyway, so that's just a suggestion for how do we do that bare minimum mode. Okay. Number 2, say no more often. I know it feels selfish. It's not selfish. And selfish isn't a bad thing. This is one of my mini soapboxes. I apologize. Actually, no, I'm not going to apologize for my soapbox. Selfish isn't always a bad thing. It means you're putting yourself and your needs first. It doesn't mean you're necessarily doing it at the detriment to others. It just means that you're prioritizing what you need. And when we're grieving, and definitely when we're burned out, we need to prioritize what we need first. And every time you say yes to something that drains you, you're saying no to yourself. We all have very full lives. We have very full plates of things on our lives. And if we're choosing to say yes to something, we're putting that thing on our plate that we're going to carry around. And we're going to run out of room. And so if we don't start saying no to some things, stuff falls off the plate. And that's when we're in that burnout mode. We can't keep things on our plate because they're all just falling off because the plate is too full. We don't have enough space to hold all the things. Practicing phrases like, I don't have capacity for that right now, or I need to take a step back for my own well-being, or I care about you and I can't hold this for you today. When I'm working with a client and they have a friend who just went through a loss, and they are like daily texters, check in on each other all the time. And my client's going through something and they're wanting to reach out to their friend, and they're also trying to be respectful because they know they're grieving. And so they've come up with some language that's helpful. Hey, I need to vent about X, Y, or Z. Do you have capacity for that right now? So we can ask those check-in questions as the friends and community members of people who are grieving, is like, hey, I know you're in pain. I know you've got a lot on your plate. Do you have capacity for this right now? Can you sit in this with me and either let me vent or be with me while I'm sad? And then our grievers, they can say, we can choose to say no. We can say, thank you for asking. I don't right now. Can you check in with me in 2 hours or tomorrow morning after I've had a good night's sleep? Just because we have access to everyone through phones and social media doesn't mean that we are entitled to immediate responses. And I think this is a great example of how to remember that. Okay, another option, building in intentional rest. And I don't mean sleep more. Yes, like sleep more if you can. More than that though, like build time in where you're not caretaking. Okay, so you lost your partner, you lost a parent figure, and you still have tiny humans or big humans that you're taking care of and supporting. Is there a way to build in time where you're not in those caretaking roles? If you have a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia and you're in a caretaking role, do you have time to build in for breaks and reprieve and respite care? Are you able to build time in where you're not problem solving and making lots of hard decisions? Time when you're not taking on someone else's emotions, even if it's just 10 minutes where nobody needs anything from you, where, okay, kiddos are doing quiet time in their rooms and you can lay on the couch for 10 minutes before one of them comes out and asks, is a quiet time over yet? Like, it doesn't have to be these big long chunks. You don't have to get away somewhere for a week. Even just budgeting in 10 to 20 minutes throughout the day, every day, for your little break. Like, great, do that. That will help alleviate some of it. And then lastly, replenish what's being drained. So if your job is emotionally draining, what refills you after work? Does moving your body in gentle ways feel good? Does reading a fun book do that for you? Does cooking? I know some people really love cooking. That's life-giving for them. Doing the things that refill you. If your family needs a lot from you, who's checking in on you? Do you have a close friend or a coworker, someone who feels safe and is willing to send check-in texts or silly memes? I know there's lots of reels and jokes about different friendships and how they just are. We text, and then we also send all these memes through social media, or gifs or reels through social media. How are they checking in on you? And if your grief is taking up all of your energy, what's even one small thing you can do just for yourself? Is it getting that emotional support beverage, that latte? I love a good cozy cup on the drive home. Like maybe you need a yummy tea. That I'm just thinking of things that are for myself. But what's one small thing you can do for yourself? Is it adding in 2 extra minutes to your shower? Is it, instead of listening to your partner or your kid's favorite music, you're choosing to listen to your music because that's what you need right now? Is it sitting outside while dinner cooks for 3 minutes? What are small things that you can do for you? It doesn't have to be big. I think we get caught up in it needing to be big because we feel so depleted that I need large pockets of things to replenish. And yeah, those are great. Try to plan for those at some point if you can, but not everybody has the capacity, means, or privilege to take those big, long breaks like that. So how do we make it small? Okay, one thing I got to do a quick call out before we wrap up today's episode, the guilt loop. Yes, the guilt loop. This is what happens when you know that you need rest, but the second you try to take it, you feel guilty. And OMG, I struggle with this all the time. You think I should be doing more. Other people have it worse. I don't deserve to take a step back. And listen, that's guilt. And guilt is a liar. Sometimes our heads are not very kind to us. The thoughts that we're having, they're just thoughts. They're not necessarily truth or facts. They're just thoughts. We do not have to listen to the guilt in our head. And rest is not a reward that you have to earn by burning yourself out. It's a necessity. Elise Myers had this great sweatshirt a couple years ago. I think maybe it was during COVID, and it was an astronaut floating in space, and under it says, "Rest is productive," because it is. We are entitled to rest. We don't have to wait until we deserve it, because if we're waiting for us to earn it or deserve it, we'll never take it. So wrapping up today's episode, I know this was a lot. Grief is exhausting. Burnout is real, and you're allowed to be tired. It is not weakness to say that you're tired. It is not possible to continue showing up for everyone else while running on empty. We've got to take breaks. Saying no, resting, and lowering the bar is not failing. It's not. It's survival. And most importantly, you do not have to earn the right to take care of yourself. So if this episode hit home, I want you to pick one small thing, make it small, one small thing you can do today that's just for you, and something that gives back to you instead of taking more away. And if you need to hear it from someone else, I'm giving you permission, doctor's orders. If you like this episode, share it with someone who needs it. And as always, remember to please be kind to yourselves today. This is hard work, and you're doing a great job. We'll see you next time. Take care. That's it for today's episode of Grief is the New Normal. If this conversation resonated with you or you think it might benefit someone else, please share it. Sharing can open doors to healing, understanding, and normalizing these griefy conversations. If you're craving deeper insights or ongoing support, consider signing up for the Grief Gap newsletter. It's packed with resources, tips, and personal stories to help you navigate your grief journey. Visit the website www.griefisthenewnormal.com to subscribe. For those who prefer a more personal touch to their healing process, check out my grief journal, Authentically Unapologetic. It's designed to help you explore your grief on your own terms, with prompts and exercises that encourage reflection and growth. I'm Dr. Heather Taylor, and I look forward to our next meaningful conversation. Our soothing tunes are provided by the Datacorns. If you're interested in sharing your story, collaborating, or learning more, please email me at hello@griefisthenewnormal.com. You can also stream the episodes on YouTube for more engaging content. Until next time, keep exploring your grief with intention and support, remembering you don't have to do this alone.